Welcome back to Sensible 2020. I am your event host, Seth Adler. It is my honor to be bringing you together. This next panel is Ev Hazlett, moderating shared experience supporting people through problematic drug use. I'll turn it over to Ev.
Hello, welcome everyone. This session is about the complicated process of supporting people through problematic drug use. It consists of discussion regarding helpful insights, boundaries, and approaches for supporting people through problematic drug use. Our wonderful speakers have both lived and shared experiences, and I really can't wait for the dialogue that is to come. So happy to be your moderator. Our speakers will be Irina Alexander, Lunadelmar Suescun, and William Miller Jr. And I'd like first for each panelist to introduce themselves and just take a moment. So Irina, you would like to start?
Hi, I'm Irina. I am a therapist with the Harm Reduction Therapy Center and with SAGE Institute. I've been doing outreach work for the past 10 years, starting with outreach work with HIPS in DC and eventually doing outreach work with At the Crossroads for the past 7 years. And I'm also an adherence rater for MAPS and have been a part of SSDP for a long time. Used to be on the board and all of that stuff.
Awesome. And William, if you'd like to go next.
Hello, I'm William Miller Jr. I'm a Baltimore, Maryland. I work with Behavioral Health System Baltimore through Behavioral Health System Baltimore with the help of William Miller Sr. created Be More Power. The Power stands for Peers Offer Wellness Educational Resources. And we specialize in street outreach, which is giving out naloxone. That leads to a lot of things. And most of the time we deal with different diverse groups. So I work with many other organizations nationally as well as in the city. So I'll just leave that for the questions and answers.
Awesome. And Luna?
So my name is Luna. I'm a case manager for people who use drugs at a syringe exchange program that's part of an AIDS service organization. I've been there for about 1.5 years. I joined SSDP in 2016. I was part of the Florida International University chapter, back in school again, and I'm part of a chapter at Metropolitan State University of Denver, and I'm happy to be here today and share any type of experiences and things that I can today.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for being here. We are so lucky to have your wisdom. I'm just going to jump in because we don't have tons of time. So I'd like to begin first by asking how you recommend people establish boundaries for both themselves and the people that they're attempting to support. And Luna, if you would like to begin this time.
Yeah. So I work a lot with like supporting problematic substance use, more in like a professional setting. So I think it'd be probably a little bit different if it's like your friend versus like, obviously it's like a job. I have my boundaries that after certain this time I won't answer, knowing that if I'm in a good state. And that's also like definitely be applied to like with your friends. Like if, recognizing that if you're not having a good state of mind or you just can't be there wholly for the person, it's important to recognize that because if they're coming to you for support, they deserve your full attention. And sometimes you have to realize that you can't. I think that's one of the things that's very helpful for me, knowing when if I'm able to be present, because everyone deserves that. So I think that's for me one of the main things. Like, can I be present for that person? And being able to like how you can say that to that person and being like, I want to be here for you, but let's get back to another point. And if you can't be there for them, finding some other resource or somebody else that could also support them as well.
Awesome. And William?
With me, I try not to make sure that I do well. What I do a lot of self-reflection on myself first of all. See if I'm, if I'm there, if I'm able to do it, who the person is, as well as let that person guide themselves with my support. And again, I always go back to self and make sure I don't personalize it, because there's a lot of people we're here, and what I get talked to at this time is what people told me to do. Now I want to see, hey, let's find out what you want to do. And every chance I get to have a teachable moment, I slide it in there, and give them compliments saying, well, hey, you went to the needles chain. That's good. That's showing that you care about yourself, then encourage and empower that person. Because I'm also a peer recovery coach and a registered peer recovery um, supervisor that I can supervise a peer. So I just try to do that and keep the boundaries up. I want to give them money. However, at this time, I can't give them money. But me being the harm reductions, I will give them money when I see there's a certain need that they have, when people might think that I'm wrong for doing that. However, this person won't be sick or take the initiative to, people with crutches try to rob somebody and get themselves hurt. So I'm trying to reduce the harm in that way also. So I take different initiatives, but again, it come back to me about making sure that I'm good, my mental's right, as well as that person letting them guide themselves with the support.
Totally. And Irina?
Yeah, I think this is such an important and such a big topic. I think it's really important that when you love other people, you don't forget to love yourself too. It can just be really easy to just be like, all right, here, you take everything, you take my life, and really it can spiral into this martyrdom complex, just I'm gonna give myself up fully to help others. And if you start seeing yourself do that and start seeing yourself slip into oh, I just don't have any time or any space for myself, then really pausing and seeing what need it is that you're trying to get to, because there's a way you can kind of follow through, okay, what happens at the end of this tunnel, and at the end of it, I have nothing left, I'm breaking down, I'm sobbing, I'm crying, I'm totally not doing any self-care. And at that point, I want other people to come in and take care of me. So how about instead of going through that whole process, you just stop at the beginning and you're like, oh, hey, I actually need a little bit of support right now, let me go get that, and then refuel myself to help others.
Totally. I think, just remembering to love yourself and hold those boundaries is when you're trying to provide support is so important. Positive reinforcement and reflection, I think, is very, very encapturing. And let's move on to the next question. So the name of the session is Lived and Shared Experiences. So I was wondering if our panelists can describe what those things are and how people can use both types of experiences in order to support people through problematic drug use. William, if you'd like to begin this time.
Lived and shared. To me, I work with a lot of people who have the lived experience, meaning whatever that was they're going through, they actually experienced it. And for a lot of people on certain stages, they're not able to say like myself that I'm an active drug user, or I'm this, I'm that. So those lived experiences helps, and sometimes it may get in the way when people have those lived experiences, but other people don't supposed to know, meaning the organization you work for, things like that, because that comes up a lot when people cannot identify as an active drug user. And I always identify as the active drug user that people think, well, what kind of drug is it? Well, when you go get that red wine, alcohol is a drug. So remember that. So, I mean, those type of things discourage people. So my shared experience is just my growing up in my environment. And how I combine the two is, again, it's back to myself. How can I help me from Baltimore City? How did I help what's going on right now? Because it's an ongoing living experience that some people are still going through, such as myself. And if we think about it, it's a lot of us that's going through the lived experience, even though you don't share the same experiences that other people share, injecting, smoking meth, because the coast to coast is different drugs, so that's how I try to incorporate it, again, by listening. How can I help out? How can I be an advocate for myself and for others, and also empower people to understand that we all great, we all worth something, and how to make them believe that they are. And that gets them to move in a different way of, if they don't want to stop using drugs, drug education, health, drink more water, stay hydrated. So I use those things to try to integrate little steps to get people where they may want to be, but people tell them they should be. And they just, I know me, keep telling me something, I'm be like, forget it, I'm not doing it. So I try to empower people and let them lead their own, again, guide them, lead their own quest to what they want to do, however they want to do it, but just staying healthy and doing so.
That's beautiful. I think empowering people is such a just heartwarming way of supporting people, you know, just empowering people to make their own decisions, but also just supporting them in that. Irina, if you would like to go next.
Yeah, I think like a comment that I have is throughout, like in drug policy, there became this really big move to focus on lived experiences as like, okay, this, like focusing on the individual as kind of like the person to talk about, you know, like this person went through this really hard experience and like now they're here to share with the rest of whoever's at a conference or whoever's in a community or whatever, like this is my individual experience. And I think that what that was leaving out is the fact that we're all social beings. Like we are all interconnected, you know, one person's experience affects another's and another's and another's. And like focusing on the fact that like we live in community, we live in society, and like it gets a lot more complex than just like one person's story. You know, it's like one person might tell their story, but then someone might show up and say, well, I'm the mom of a son, or like my son died from an overdose and I don't want drugs to be legal because of that. You know, and like although like the like individual with the experience is her son who died, like suddenly there's like the impact that his death left on another and another and another and another. And it's this like recognition that like we're all in this together and we're all impacted by the war on drugs. And we need to look at that instead of just like one person's individual story.
I totally agree. I think that there's been a very strong emphasis really recently on self-care. And so in a course that I took last fall, it really brought out community care and just the idea of that we are all social beings. And, you know, it is important to care for yourself, but the community, you know, your community is how you care for each other, how you care for yourself in a lot of ways. So that's just kind of what popped into my head too. Community care and self-care are very, very intertwined. And Luna?
Yeah, so obviously it's really important to go and talk about the people who have experienced that and that they should be a part of the conversation about, you know, like how services should be provided and stuff like that. But if you just focus on like, oh, I can't be a good provider if I've never had a problematic substance use, if I never used any drugs, and like, I feel like that's not right, because then that's kind of saying that people who use drugs like don't deserve love and compassion. The only people that can love them is people who've had similar experiences, and like that's not the reality of it. Like Irina said, like we're all in this together, we're all being affected, and it's like we can't fight against something without having any allies. You know, like being able to use our privilege of like, even if we're, you know, whether you're a person who's actively using drugs or not, and being able to like be an ally and share and be there for other people is really, really important. And that's where I think like the shared part comes from.
Totally. When I first read through this title, the first thing that kind of popped into my head was exactly what you all have described with the balance of lived and shared experience. Sometimes there really is no balance, but you know, from a substance user myself, I struggle with nicotine all the time. And so I think that the shared experience is really part of understanding the emotions and a lot of the feelings that can come from drug use in general, as well as problematic drug use. And while not comparing your own use to others and things like that, but just kind of remembering that those emotions do exist within those, and the substances do not have to be the same, the usage does not have to be the same, but there still is some shared experience and shared emotions and shared feelings within all of that. So thank you all. And so our next question is, how do you think that we can build the intersection between supporting people through problematic drug use in a clinical regard and in an informal way, more for a family, friend, or an ally regard, caring for people? And so Irina, if you would like to begin.
Sure. The thing that comes to mind is thinking about the stages of change. So it's this like theory in psychology that whenever someone goes through any sort of behavioral change, you know, like let's say you're like, I want to go to the gym, which everyone always does. But before that, you actually spend a lot of time there, like all of these different stages of that change before you get to the actual action of going to the gym. You know, like first you're not even thinking about it. Then you start thinking about it like, maybe one day I should go to the gym. Then you start planning for it. And you're like, well, what gym would I go to? I don't know. Like maybe I can get some nice shoes, like whatever, whatever. And then you eventually start taking steps of like, you end up getting those shoes, you end up signing up for a gym. And finally there's the step of the action, you know, the like, okay, I am in it, I'm going to the gym, it's happening. And then you're maintaining that, you know? So like we think of behavioral change as just like, you're either doing something or you're not, you know? And with every step of that process, there are different things that you can kind of like help people reflect on, you know? So like when someone's in the like thinking about it phase of a process, they're doing a lot of questioning. They're like, well, let me weigh out the pluses and minuses. Let me consider what's really right for me. Let me think about this. And I really like using that in working with clients, and also in work in like supporting friends, you know, especially around drug use. It's like someone might be at a certain stage of change about any one of their drug use relationships. You know, it might be that they're like thinking about using drugs more often, and they're like in the thinking about it phase with that. So you need to join them there instead of trying to push them into a different part of the process, you know, because like if you start putting more energy into something than the person's putting into it themselves, that's an easy way to get burnt out. So you really just like meet the person in whatever stage they're at and support them in that stage. Like, and if they're like, oh, I want to like, you know, drink a little less, then instead of being like, well, you should stop drinking, like period, you know, like they'll be like, okay, screw you, like I'm not talking to you then, you know, being like, oh, well, why are you thinking of drinking less? Like whenever one of my clients comes to me and is like, I want to stop using speed, my first question is, but why? You know, and really like meeting them there and joining them like in whatever part of the process they're in, and exploring and questioning and like really getting to know them like from this like loving, heart open, non-judgmental place.
I think that is so important. I think that we often forget that it, you know, everything is a process, and you need to support at all levels and meet them where they are. And, you know, I feel like it's very easy to skip a lot of those processes. And, you know, if you're not able to see the experiences throughout all of them or be there, but just, you know, trying to zone in on where they're at, how they can move forward, and being there for them if they move back as well. So, Luna, if you would like to add.
So it's like, obviously in the clinical setting, you have like a lot of tools that are like really helpful and help you guide, but it's like, I think the main thing is listening, being able to listen, and like in whatever point they are, and just trying to like, just give them that space to be able to like a sounding board and just some feedback. You know, sometimes you might not know what to say, because that happens to me. It's just like sometimes just like you can just like reflect back, because like sometimes we just don't know. And I think just like the simplest thing is just like being able to listen, because then people can kind of like hear what they're saying. Like for me, sometimes it's helpful to just be like, just being able to say, and then hearing myself say it out loud can kind of bring me to like, okay, understanding a little bit more what's going on in my brain. What is the change that I want to make, if I want to make the change in the first place, if at all. And I think too, we see a lot with like in the clinical way, it's like, okay, abstinence is the only thing. And it's like, okay, if you do want to make that change, obviously abstinence isn't the only option. It could just be even like just changing one substance for the other. So just trying to like reflect back what others are saying, and just like being like fully present and listening in a way that you're still like within your boundaries. But that's definitely what I would consider to be like a really key point in supporting someone.
Totally. And William, if you would like to close us out on this question.
Absolutely, sure. When I think about allies, clinical, or people that just believe they can support people who use drugs, so people support people, a variety of people. Sometimes they think about, it's a box that I always use. I put stuff in a box, or people put stuff in a box, and that's how the thought process is. I take those things out the box. So relating, and what Luna said, was understanding. So some people feel as though they have to relate in order to support that person. And then it's like, well, there's nothing I can do. And then that person's lost. If we just be active listeners sometimes, you know, give them some words back and let people understand that we're listening to them, let them know we understand, but we haven't lived, or had those experiences. Because even though some people are active drug users, they haven't had the same experience. It's all about, to me, is understanding, and then you can be more valuable as a person who haven't dealt with individuals as such. Because not just clinical, just people, faith-based, different religions, things like that. Just the understanding part, and sometimes I feel people cannot relate. So it's like, well, there's nothing I can do. I haven't been homeless. Well, there's nothing I can't listen. I don't want to talk to you, and that pushes people further away, I believe, because it's like the distancing. Oh, I'm not, some words we use, but this is a PG program. So I just feel as though those two things that's in some people boxes, relating and understanding, along with taking a holistic approach, not just servicing the person, what else all it needs, and that we can get that understanding and move a little forward and supporting anyone. Mostly people who don't have a lot of self-esteem about themselves in the first place.
William, you actually just gave some new reasoning to the box I have on my arm. So thank you. I'm going to cherish that for a long time.
I like to create things, so you're welcome.
I love that. Active listening is something that I've really been trying to work on in myself. And a friend once said a few weeks ago to me, they said, if you're thinking too hard while someone else is talking, you're not listening hard enough. And it just kind of stuck with me a little bit. So I hope somebody else sticks with it too. And so our last question, and then I'll ask if you guys have any, final words, is how do we support people through problematic drug use in a compassionate way that does not come off as policing and rather sets them up for success rather than unrealistic expectations, and that does not negatively compare drug users to one another? And let's begin with Luna.
So I think one of the first things is you shouldn't compare people who use drugs to each other, like, at all. Like William had mentioned, everyone has had their own individual experiences. Some can be pretty similar, but it's like people use for different reasons, people use at different times, and it's not always necessarily a negative experience. So one thing is, if you do want to have a conversation with someone about their substance use, is like, do you think it's problematic or do they think it's problematic? And that's really important, because it's like, if I'm not ready to make a change, like, no one's going to convince me. And then, like, policing, like, I wouldn't be like asking them all the time, just like, and having sometimes the conversations too about like that person's triggers when they feel comfortable, like, okay, when do you feel like, you have to use and you can't control yourself, or kind of something like that. But I think just kind of like, if it happens that the change isn't happening as quick as they want, or if it's just not happening like that, it's okay, because we're all kind of like in different situations. But just like I had said before, like, just listening, not judging. And I think also recognizing when something could be a trigger for yourself if you've had a previous experience. Just being like, hey, like, I can't do this right now. But mostly just, like I'd mentioned before, like, listening, and just giving them the option to talk about what they feel comfortable and ready to talk about.
And Irina?
Oh, this is kind of like the whole question of the whole panel, right? Yeah, I think I don't believe in the tough love approach. I don't believe in enabling, like, that concept. I don't think that that's a thing that happens. I think that we can love people and we can cross our boundaries, and that sucks. But that goes back to the whole self-care thing. So if someone in your life is struggling with their drug use, I'd say the first thing is to do your work and to catch your stigma, to like really fully be like, okay, what is this feeling that's coming up for me? Where is that coming from? Like, reflecting in your own space and in your own time, not like with your friend who's struggling, but maybe with a therapist, or shout out, or with other friends, people who you can safely do that work with, because that's your own work to handle. And after, pausing and catching that stigma, then coming at it from a place that's, first off, recognizing that the fact that they're even sharing this with you is super vulnerable, and means that they really trust you. and they're giving you a gift of something. You know, they're letting you into their lives in a way that they're probably not letting a lot of other people in. So if your instinct is to push people away when that happens, then that's something you should probably check. But after that, really coming at it from a place of curiosity, like curiosity, non-judgment, support, love, affection, you know, and just being like, oh, like, interesting, so you've been using speed recently, can you tell me more about that if you want, you know, like, what are the good things about it, not just focusing on the bad things, because there are good things about it. Like, if people are making a decision to use a drug, then they're getting something out of it, you know. It's not just like, oh my god, this drug took over my body when I woke up and I don't know what's happening. It's like, no, there's a purpose and an intention behind it, and like helping people reflect and mirror and understand themselves and understand their drug use, and like making space for the good side of drug use is really important in order for there to be space for like the things that aren't as good. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
That was very powerful. And William?
Can you repeat the question real quick?
Yep. How do we support people through problematic drug use in a compassionate way that does not come off as policing, but rather sets people up for success, and rather than unrealistic expectations, and does not negatively compare one drug user to another?
I use transparency a lot, and I use the something that a lot of people I feel as though cannot, where I work at, and the transparency part, we call it keeping it real, whatever how you want to put it. And if I can't do it, I'm gonna say I can't do it. Let me get back to you. Let me actually look into it. And when we say these things, people been let down so much, they don't think I'm coming back. So when I come back, keep showing up, that's one of the things that show them that I don't have to say any word, use none of those words. They can see it. Oh, like he here. And I had a tragedy in my life, so I'm kind of recovering these last 5 years because I was hit by a tow truck and I was in a wheelchair, and I started doing this work while I was in a wheelchair. So the same people that I go to, this is the same people that helped me, and they like, oh, and I'm coming out here on a cane. So that let me know that I'm safe out there when I go out there to feed people, give them a couple of hours, give them a substance or buy them a substance. You know, some people look at me like I'm crazy when I say those things. And real quick on why I know this helps and how I know I was doing the right thing, because 2 years ago, my dad was sitting on the corner of Pennsylvania and Long Street in Baltimore City. Every night, people will call me and say, hey, what you gonna do with your dad? What am I doing for? What do you want to do? You know, that's the question I asked them. I made sure that he wasn't sick, and I couldn't take him home every night. Some people say, why you couldn't take him home? Because I had to go to work. Leaving a person alone in that state using, we never know what happened. His granddaughter can walk in and see. So that was the showing part of my compassion and how I talk to people. However, my dad is doing great right now. So the tactics I know works. And this was the hardest part that I had to actually deal with, because as someone said, it was family. It was my dad, and his granddaughter would have been devastated because they have a relationship, So I just use transparency and let myself be in those places where I say I'm going to be. And if I can't, I can't do it, So using that transparency, everything else come around, I believe. Even when a person want to get themselves well or do a little better while still managing their drug use. That's the word to me, managing your drug use if you're still.
Well, thank you all so much for all of your words and wisdom. We are so fortunate to have you in this session and just contributing to our movement, our network. Thank you so much for being part of our virtual conference and the work that you do to support drug users, both in and outside of our movement, just members of the world's community. I wanted to ask if there's any last minute things that you would like to say before we open up the floor for question and answer.
I'll go first then. I just want to say, Kate Humphreys, I just want to give him a big shout out, Kate Humphreys. Just those people that I know, I could keep going on and on, but just want to give a shout out to her and Betty, because that's how I got I'm involved with SSDP when I was in Baltimore 2 years ago. I met Kate at Denver doing our safe consumption talk. So, not Denver, Dallas, I'm sorry. So I just wanted to send that shout out.
Awesome. And Luna or Irina, either?
Shout out to Kat too. Yeah, she's she's amazing, and she's out there. She had to step off the panel because she's out there on the front lines and working every day, and that's like a really big question of all the coronavirus stuff. It's like self-care versus care of others. At what point does caring for others actually hurt them? At what point does it hurt you? It's like, it's bringing all the questions. Like, I'm out there only a couple days a week, but like, it's bringing all of those questions up of like, where are my boundaries? Where are your boundaries? Am I hurting? Am I helping? Is my present? You know, it's just, oof, what a situation.
Totally. You know, if there's one thing I think SSD peers and the topic of this conversation is, there's a lot of tough scenarios, there's a lot of tough situations, but you know, we get through it by supporting one another. So thank you all for contributing to the panel and all of your wonderful knowledge, wisdom, guidance. And now I would like to open it up to question and answer. However, as I do so, I just want to remind everyone to be conscious of their language. This can be a sensitive topic for many people. And so I would just like to put that into the air. Please be conscious of your questions. And if you have a specific panelist that you would like an answer from, please specify that too. But it's totally cool to just ask all the panelists at once. They're all fabulous.